What's up everybody, welcome back to another episode of the Custom Track Wiiki Showcase, a series where I talk about some custom content made for Mario Kart Wii throughout the month that I find interesting. Today's episode is on everything uploaded to the wiki during August 2022. This month had a pretty decent amount of activity to round out the summer season, with a lot of different creators releasing something of theirs, which is nice. We do have quite a few tracks to get through though, 12 tracks for the main segment and 14 for the rapid fire showcase, so this will probably be another longer episode, but hopefully not as long as last month's episode. Let's get started. To start this month off, we have a couple of tracks coming from a custom track jam competition. More specifically, jam number 4 from season 4, featuring the theme of Mario Kart DS sequel tracks, or thematically similar new versions of the tracks that came from Mario Kart DS, with the results being posted on August 4th. The first track we'll be taking a look at is the track that placed first in the competition. This is Shroom Skybridge by Fafina. Fafina's become a common creator in this showcase series. They were featured in last month's episode with Birdo Circuit, and in a previous video as well with Rio Resort. They're a newer creator that emerged this year that's improved pretty fast from their first track. This is actually Fafina's first CT Jam track, I believe, and I find it really cool that they also won the CT Jam with their first ever submission. This track is a sequel to DS Shroom Ridge, with this being a similar layout of another Ridge track that is yet to be fully finished. Conceptually more of a prequel track than a sequel, but regardless I can definitely see why this won the jam despite the number of great tracks submitted to that competition. This is very smooth with its blender modeling, and its solid and simpler design works great with the Shroom Ridge gimmick of having the cars pass through the entire track. It's ultimately a simpler track designed for straightforward races, and it only has a couple of shortcuts, but the cars act as great obstacles in areas like the spiral, where avoiding the tightest line online might be a consideration when the other racers are driving with you. It depends on whether they also play it safe or if they go for the risk as well. I also really like the unfinished nature of this track. Not unfinished in the CT sense, but thematically, the track takes place in a version of Shroom Ridge that is unfinished in the Mario universe. This idea is conveyed more through the visuals than in the design, but it's still a very strong element to the track. The industrial theming has been relatively unexplored in Mario Kart tracks in light of more cartoonish highway courses, so it's unique in that sense and has its own personality because of it. The yellow signs off to the side of the road, the wood and steel materials scattered along the background denoting future plans with the course while it's still being raced on, the roadwork ahead, yeah I sure hope it does sign, and the other simpler structures and machinery throughout the track fill up the scenery really well and work to differentiate this from Shroom Ridge. Despite there only being one road texture in the gameplay being relatively similar throughout, the background scenery switches things up to keep things fresh throughout the design, and the shorter design helps to balance it out as well. The sensitive visuals and all the textures were really well chosen, and it looks great and unique, yet still sharp and very professional. Overall, this is a very well put together track considering it's a jam course with a time limit on it, but everything comes together incredibly well. There's some glitchiness that I was having fun experimenting with when testing this, but none of that actually affects the track itself, which is nice. According to the CT Jam server, Fafina does plan on updating this one in order to submit it to CTGP for further feedback, which I think is a great idea. It will be interesting to see how a simpler track like this would be received, even if this could simply be ruled too similar to Shroom Ridge to be accepted, which would be understandable. I still really like it regardless and would love to see it in the pack. Great stuff as always, Fafina. I'm looking forward to your future projects since your consistent improvements have been exciting to keep up with. We have another track from the same Mario Kart DS sequels competition to cover here though, with this one being from a creator I have not talked about in this series before. We'll be covering the track that placed second as well, which is Crazy 8 Circuit by Cottony. Cottony is a very interesting creator to see in the CT Jam competition, as he's an older creator who made tracks back in 2014 and 2016, with this last track being released in August of 2017. He's a very talented creator though. You guys might know Yoshi's Magic Yarn Basket and Pipeline Skyway 2 if you've played at least a couple distributions outside of CTGP, though Cottony has since denounced all of his work prior to this track on his wiki page, labeling them as old tracks, even though this is the only new one. I've seen him around on the CTGP side of the community off and on for the past few years, but it was really cool to see him make his CT Jam debut in the same jam as Fafina, with them getting top 2 as well. Anyways, I know I'll have to explain this track as soon as possible since you guys are probably confused by the gameplay. This track is a sequel to DS Figure 8 Circuit that takes one of the simplest courses in the game that is in the shape of an 8 to one of the craziest CTs. that's also in the shape of an 8. Essentially, racers have to drive lap 1 backwards on lap 2. Then laps 3 and 4, the players get a choice between the forwards and backwards paths, as they are able to be taken simultaneously. It may look complicated on the first playthrough, but I was actually able to more easily grasp it than I initially expected once I started playing the track. I would love to try this one online since I had quite a bit of fun teaching this one and playing with the bots as well. The design is perfect in the sense that both directions of the track are as intuitive as possible, with this having shroom shortcuts with the metal stage that is faster both ways. The catacracks on there are a nice touch as well. Laps 1 and 2 are great introductions to both of the paths, with the one path being blocked off until lap 3, and I really like how the choice is made right at the split path since it changes the entire direction of the race if someone decides to change their mind last second. The items are crazy here as you have to dodge them from all angles, and bullet bills and stars could be coming from opposite directions. The added shortcut using the mushroom and block on the lap 1 path is also very nice to spice gameplay up, though I did fail it in the video. That's okay though. The KMP actually does a solid job holding things up on the technical side, and I can definitely commend Contney for the work he put in there, especially for a competition course under a time limit. Usually you wouldn't want to sink too much time into checkpoints or the KMP otherwise, so that was cool to see. Visually, this track is pretty simple and mostly emulates Figure 8 Circuit, but I've heard that better visuals are to come in future updates. I do like how online-centric it is though, and I'm personally fine with it looking like this, though I definitely welcome some more developed visuals. This was submitted to C2GP, but was rejected mostly due to the visuals and the less intuitive nature of the track, but personally I think this would be perfect as a secret track in C2GP. This was actually pulled publicly as one of the options for the secret track slot, replacing Torrens N64 Rainbow Road, but it ultimately didn't make it past round 1 of voting since people gravitated more to the tracks that were previously in C2GP, like Super Sky Courtyard, District 65, and Disco Fever. Regardless, this is a great track with a welcome, unique design, and I'm looking forward to any future tracks of Contney's if he has anything planned in the future, maybe in 5 more years. Awesome stuff. Up next, we have a track that was previously submitted to a CT Jam competition back in mid-2020, but was updated with the major model overhaul this month. This is Starlit Sanctuary by Kozakira, which was updated on August 8th. Kozakira is a name I've mentioned a few times in this series before. He's a creator who's made many tracks and is most known for his submissions to every single Custom Track Jam competition so far, I believe. He was pretty active this month, releasing many updates to tracks of his throughout August, and this was his most ambitious update. This was a track that he made for the Twilight Jam back in Season 2, which placed pretty high until it was disqualified for a modified object that it included. It was a grand course with a dark and purple tint to the presentation, and Koza essentially took that initial idea and ran with it in this update in the form of model tweaks. This track is different for Koza, but it still plays to his strengths. He usually makes tracks in this vein with similar road width and more calculated but dynamic modeling, with smooth turns, uphills, and downhills. It stays true to what SketchUp's strengths are as a modeling program. I think it works great for this track though. It has an interesting design with an indoor section, banked hills, boardwalks, off-road cuts in a few parts of the track, and objects to differentiate the gameplay and act as obstacles like the thwomps and the Bowser statues that are used very nicely. It switches things up throughout the track to keep things fresh. This track is definitely fun to time trial, in which racers would shoot for a fast time with more simple driving mechanics, and it has a decent amount of boost panels to keep races fast paced. I think the combination of the longer design and how the off-road was used would lead to some balanced online races for sure. I definitely like the changes that Koza made in this version. They all enhance the track quite a bit from its original CTJM appearance. The visual presentation is also really nice in this track. The textures look unique with their purple hue, and I like the texture choices that Koza made for this track. The skybox is generally purple, but it has that brighter red horizon that's just barely peeking from over the walls, and I really like that aspect of the track. It throws in just a little bit of red in the color palette to make the track stand out. I would suggest some more variance in the design with more open-ended areas or wider road, like the indoor section with the tighter line, and I'd experiment with adding a couple more elaborate shortcuts to spice up races and add a bit of a learning curve, but overall I think this is a really great track and I loved playing this one. I'm glad to see Koza return to this track as this was one of my favorites from his older CT Jam stuff. Great stuff here. It was only a matter of time before we ran into our first ZPL track of the month. This is GBA Snow Land by ZPL, which was uploaded on August 15th. ZPL is one of the more popular creators with one of the most appearances in this series, especially after last month when I featured 9 tracks of his. His activity was still very solid this month, but most of what he posted were smaller projects and commissions that I'll mention later. This track is a new version of GBA Snow Land based on the Wave 2 DLC in Mario Kart 8 Deluxe. I do really like the direction Nintendo went in with that Wave 2 DLC, and I think ZPL did a great job recreating it. The design is very strong, where it feels 3D but still makes sense as a GBA track, which is perfect for Wii since there's no anti-gravity involved. But yeah, the layout has a perfect length for a retro course like this, and ZPL included that one bigger shortcut near the start of the track, which I really like. It adds a little more depth to the course and works well for how Wii races usually play out. My favorite section is probably the more risky ice section in the middle due to it being the highest impact area with the out of bounds and the penguins walking around acting as great obstacles. I also do like the model changes that ZPL made to make races faster paced here. Most notably, the ramp out of the ice section gives much less airtime than the 8 Deluxe version. Otherwise, it plays just like the DLC version and looks like it too. Despite how fast ZPL made the track, he definitely didn't rush the visual process. The snowy background, the trees, the houses, the enemies on the finish line, the crystals, the skybox with the mountains, and the snowman all work together to create the nice, calm, snowy atmosphere. It sets itself apart visually from DK Summit and Shroom Land as well, which is nice. I don't have much else to say on this one considering most of my opinions would be better attributed to Nintendo's design over ZPL's work here, but that just shows how good of a job he did to recreate the track on Wii. Awesome job here, ZPL. ZPL was not the only person to upload a Mario Kart 8 version of GBA Snow Land this month though. In fact, there was another version uploaded just 3 days after by a completely different author, someone who is also very familiar to the series. This is GBA Snow Land by Squire Turnbull, which was uploaded on the 18th of the month. It's pretty cool honestly that the two titans of the CT scene in 2022 both made their own versions of Mario Kart 8's GBA Snow Land within a few days. I wasn't sure if it would make sense to cover two versions of GBA Snow Land in the same showcase when they are so similar, but they're both very well made versions, each with their own benefits. I already described the positives to ZPL's, but Squire's version has its own unique positives as well. It is visually closer to the DLC version than ZPL's with the more distinct, brighter visuals of the 8 Deluxe track. It has more of a reliance on the crystals for the background, and it's more open without the mountains and the trees. When it comes to the design, it has that same shortcut that ZPL's has near the start, but Squire added the landing fall boundary so racers would actually have to pull the cut off well to make it, which I think is good and would reward actually learning the track and establishing the learning curve. The slippery ice in the middle section works well to differentiate gameplay. There's also an added off-road shortcut onto the bridge at the end like the 8 Deluxe version, which I think is a nice touch. The penguin model is different between this and ZPL's version since the penguins are sprinting now for some reason. They are less intrusive but still work to make the gameplay more interesting. And there are moving item boxes in this version that fly through most of the design like the DLC version as well. This and some of the other changes will depend on the individual person, whether or not they think there are improvements to the other version, but I do like how the moving item sets changes up the gameplay quite a bit in the starting section with how common stationary item sets have become. I'm definitely guilty of that too with my own custom tracks. I know I had to compare the two versions to have this segment right after ZPL's track, but I honestly don't have a favorite out of these two. They both do a great job recreating the 8 Deluxe version for the Wii, though ZPL took more creative liberties with his version, which I don't mind either way. Neither of the creators submitted their tracks to CTGP, which is interesting, but with how popular CP Fusion's more creative version has become, I'm really not sure how either of these would be judged by the council. I swear I've played the current CTGP one in every competitive event I've played since it was added. But back to this track specifically, this goes to show once again how talented Squire is and how fast he is too, since he almost uploaded this at the same time as ZPL. They're both very talented in speed and quality. Amazing work here, Squire. We also had a few tracks from another custom track jam competition to cover this month, this one being jam number 5 from season 4 with the theme of Mushroom. The results were posted on August 20th, and I'll be covering the track that won the jam to start things off. This is Toad's Temple by Lucio Wins. And Tarza129. They go uncredited as an actual author on the page, but they did a lot of the work on the visuals, objects, and effects in the track. These two creators have become very prominent in the CTJM series, and I was hyped to see that these two very talented people joined forces to make a track together. This course takes place in a temple with lots of theming around toads and mushrooms, and yeah, this one blew me away when I first saw it in the CTJM results video. I do reiterate this a lot, but the fact that this is a competition track with a time limit on it really adds on to how impressive this is, since this track is incredible. Let's start with the design. It's pretty grand and definitely feels like more of Lucio's doing with the easy to follow, more straightforward modeling that I tend to see with his tracks. There's many different sections that spice gameplay up and change how the track is played. The inside of the temple has many pathways and obstacles, the cave is more enclosed and has its own mushroom section, and the outdoors has its off-road and grass near the end for that last second shortcut, making for some pretty balanced races overall. I want to go through all these sections individually since they all add something unique to the design. The first section with the mushrooms at the start with the completely separate pathway on the top ledge is really cool, and I love how fast paced the section after that is with the boost panels as well. The sliding boulders that pull out to push racers off the upper paths is a unique and great obstacle that rewards good driving and timing. The other sliding blocks and thwomps on the bottom path work well here too. These boulders remind me of some of the new Super Mario Bros. DS minigames like Wanted and Puzzle Panel. This section leads right into the mushroom part with a split path between the safe but narrow road and the mushrooms themselves. This would be perfect for online races for those split-second decisions where you have to decide if you should take the risk on the mushroom path in a similar vein to the first row of mushrooms on Mushroom Gorge. The mushrooms are also placed perfectly for intuitive and fun gameplay, which I know is difficult to get right on the first try, so kudos to the authors for nailing that element. This section leads into more standard closed-in caves, which then leads to the open cave area with the light gleaming down and the trickable middle part. This then leads into the final temple section with the big off-road cut down the middle to allow for catching up near the end of the track. That ends off on the grassy outdoor section with its own off-road at the end to allow for more chances to catch up at the end. I feel like this is really balanced since you can establish those breaks with smart gameplay at the start of the course, but you can still have those close and hectic finishes with the right items or wrong items in some cases. It's designed very well for online play. That brings me to the visuals, which as you can see are very unique and very nice. The temple sections in the outdoors, despite looking neat in their own right, are the more simpler sections with their textures. I do really like the texture choices here and how the atmosphere feels very Nintendo-like in these sections without looking like one specific track or area from a Mario game. But there are certainly some eye-catching areas and exhibits in this track that take up most of the visual attention. The lighting on the mushrooms that cycles through multiple colors inside the temple is really cool, and I don't think I've seen something quite like it before. The cave with the distorting, kind of boiling animation is also super interesting and looks great. Not entirely sure what it's supposed to represent, but it adds a lot of intrigue and atmosphere to the course as a whole. And I also had to mention again the lighting post effect that comes in right at the open cave section. Tarza is someone who I've seen really push the post effect files to their limits when most other creators don't even bother with figuring out what those files mean. At least for me, I don't have any idea. I shouldn't be speaking for others. But it's a neat touch and I'm glad it was included here. The objects were approached perfectly as well. I already mentioned the sliding blocks and thwomps in that first temple section, but I also have to mention the pink item boxes with mushrooms on them that look great, and the mushroom objects in the outdoor section which are interesting. The darker ones are Goombas that you don't want to touch, but the few brighter ones are leaf piles that I'd assume would drop mushrooms, but it didn't for me when I tried it. It's probably random chance like how it is on Maple Treeway, but regardless, I do like that added touch near the end. Custom objects are always very exciting to see, and I like it when creators spend some of their time on it for these competitions when the process of making them could end up becoming very convoluted. I like everything that these two did with the track. They're both great with the designs in their own right. I think having Lucio focused more on the design and Tarza more focused on the visuals makes for a really strong and dynamic track overall. Since the design is super strong here and the track also has those extra visual elements that Tarzan tends to add. I can definitely see why this won the jam despite how strong the other tracks were. The jams this month were really good. I will say, if the authors were interested, I would love to see this be submitted to CTGP to see where it goes, but only if the authors were interested, and I'll leave it there. Incredible work here, Lucio and Tarza. I'm looking forward to your future tracks, and I'm hoping Tarza collaborates with more people specifically so their tracks actually end up on the wiki for me to cover in these videos. There was another track I'd like to cover from the Mushroom Jam though, this one being the second place finisher in the competition to complement the first place finisher. This is Poisonous Pass by David Slane and Shorkey. These two creators have also become very prominent in the CT Jam scene in recent months. You guys might remember Candy Corp Canyon from January's video, which was another CT Jam collab track by David Slane and Shorkey. I'm glad that these two saw how well they worked together last time and decided to join forces again for this jam. This track has a more general outdoor setting with lots of poison and mushrooms surrounding the course. This is a simpler track, easier to digest than the last one for sure, but still incredibly solid. The main gimmick that this track has is actually the item boxes and the fact that they move along a path similar to Squire's GBA Snow Land that I mentioned earlier in the video. I do really like this gimmick, and I think it makes races much more interesting since stationary item boxes again have been so common with new tracks. The other gimmick, they're not really gimmicks, but more like the identifiable characteristics of the track, but the other main characteristic would be the mushrooms, and they're placed really well. It makes for a great design, and I like the combination of the moving item sets and the main mushroom section where you have to bounce around to sort of catch the item sets. It could definitely make for some fun and different online gameplay. The design is very solid. It reminds me of Bullet Bill Chill in many aspects, the shortky track that I covered last month. It has nice switch ups from the more open poisonous areas to the cave sections to the half pipe boardwalks to, of course, the mushrooms themselves. There aren't too many shortcuts other than the simpler off-road ones, but there is a more developed grass/gap cut near the middle, and there's a shroom cut with a mushroom near the end as well. The design is pretty long, but the smooth design makes it feel much shorter than it is. If I enjoyed time trialing in general, then I'd definitely go for some time trials on this one. The visuals are solid as well. The purple and pink tint in the atmosphere as a whole is pretty neat. There's a lot of brown in the color palette too, from the dirt and the sides of the mountain. It's almost like a blend between candy and poison until the darker cave part. I do really like the unique textures though. They set the track apart and look great. I believe David and Shorky plan on updating this track in the future, as I don't think they got to do everything they wanted to with this track, considering the time limit that comes with competition courses. I'll definitely be looking forward to any future updates with those bigger changes though. Overall, this is a very solid and nice track, and I can definitely see why it placed well in the jam. Great work here, guys. Our next track isn't actually a track, and this is the first time I'm covering something of this nature in this series. This is PackDev by Billy Noodles, which was updated to version 1.0.0 alpha on August 22nd. This is a program that uses LE code and Weeb's SDS tools to create custom track distributions easily by compiling them into Revolution folders for you. This program had a version dating back to late 2018 that I actually tried for myself, but it had little functionality from what I remember. This new version by Billy is much more developed, and I actually used it to successfully make my own distribution, but first I'll show you guys how this program works. The wiki page says that this is bare minimum functionality, but it definitely has most of what you'd want anyway from a pack editor or distribution creating program like this. You basically import the tracks individually or through a folder, and it automatically places them into cups based on the alphabetical order you put them in, but you can always change this order with the buttons on the bottom. You can rename the track names, change the track file if you needed to, and you can change which slot the track takes on in-game for the properties of the slot and the music separately. This part especially is really nice since you can have multiple tracks on the same slot like the Luigi circuit. You don't need to use every slot if you don't need to, and you can have a different music slot than the track itself if, let's say, you need to use Moonview Highway slot for the cars but didn't want Moonview's music. You can rename the cups if you want to and change the image for the cup icons, which I had a lot of fun with, as you can tell. Then there are some settings in the other menu for changing the pack name and some other smaller details like whether or not to add onto Nintendo's regular tracks or not. I'm sure Billy will add more stuff here in the future, but you get most of what you want in this version anyway. I ended up making a distribution for all my released and unreleased tracks to try it out, and it was perfectly functional. I was pretty satisfied with the end result. Again, you can tell I had fun with the cup icons. I forgot to test if there was Weemfi on this, but I think that usually comes from making your own Weemfi region, so I'd assume not, but maybe, I don't know. The tracks themselves seem to work very well though. Again, I didn't really notice any issues while playing offline. This seems like a really solid base for the program so far, with it being able to make a simple and completely functional distribution. And this also gives me a chance to show off some of my unreleased tracks. Would you look at that? I've always wanted a program like this that would keep the distribution making process very streamlined, easy, and simple, since I don't honestly really know how else you're supposed to do it other than making random text documents and renaming files manually. I can really see the program catching on if Billy keeps updating it to allow for as much versatility and functionality in distributions as possible. I can see it even catching on in this state for anybody that just wants to make their own distributions for fun without actually learning the manual process. It's perfectly usable in this form. Awesome job here, Billy, and I'm looking forward to future versions of this program. Coming up next, we have a track coming from an author who I haven't covered too often in this series. This is Greenwood Park by Bro of Fun, which was uploaded on the 25th of the month. Bro of Fun is a creator who generally hovers around the CTGM server. From what I could tell, he's a very talented creator that simply doesn't release or finish most of his tracks. I don't really know. I've seen a lot of great models in the Showcase channel, but he hasn't uploaded much to the wiki itself. But I have covered him in this series before, most notably his track with __, Interstellar Laboratory back in February's video. This track takes place in a mystical forest and park setting with houses, beaches, and caves that tries to combine a more realistic and cartoonish presentation. This track really shows Brofun's strengths as a creator with the more dynamic modeling and the beautiful visuals, which I'm actually going to start with because, well, look at this. The lighting is top notch with the shadows and other visual enhancements, the way that the outdoor sections look and how the light casts onto it, the way the crystals and the lanterns light up the cave, it just looks amazing. I've noticed that Brofun likes to use these circular boost panel designs in his tracks, and as a business major, I do like how that's become a part of his creator branding. The boost panel texture is always a nice way to sort of trademark your track, since you can make it mostly any scrolling arrow-like animation and it will look like a boost panel. The texture choices are also really good, of course. Hearing that this track has a cave and outdoor section, you might expect it to look like Mushroom Gorge, but it doesn't at all. I don't even know where these textures come from despite how great they look on Wii. There's probably a couple from Nintendo's courses, but the heavy shadows and saturation make them stand out and look completely different here. In a new light, one might say. My bad. It feels like a calming bike ride on a warm summer day, and I really like it. The background also fills the scene nicely with the distant trees, mountains, bodies of water, and the buildings in the town section. Moving on to the design, this is a simpler course that is easy to grasp, but it has that dynamic aspect as well with varied heights and turns, adding a lot of interest. The turns aren't perfectly angled, and you can tell the minimap even slants to the left a bit with imperfect turns, but it adds a lot of character to the track and a sort of human element, as if a human, or Mario character I guess, designed this course themselves and the world that this track takes place in. It's fun to drive with how smooth the modeling is, the boost ramps keep races faster pace, and they help distinguish each section pretty well. It goes from the park, to the beach, to the cave, to the boardwalk, then to the town fluidly, which helps keep things fresh, and the visual differences between these sections help a lot too. There are also great shortcuts. There's one with the tree at the start, there's off-road throughout the beginning and end, but not middle to change up the gameplay style there. There's a house in the middle that sort of acts as a shortcut if you land on the left side of it. Then there's a fence cut at the end, and I see this layout making for some balanced races online. This isn't a beta version, and I'm not sure what Brofun has planned for this track beyond this, since this does feel pretty finished. I would love to see future updates though to see what direction is taken, since I already like this quite a bit. Great work here, Brofun, and I'm hoping to see more tracks from you in the future as well. I'm gonna channel my inner Enmead for this one. Ladies and gentlemen, we have a pretty big return to the CT scene from a well-established author this month. This is Lost Ruins by Joris MKW, which was uploaded on August 29th. Joris is not a creator I've gotten to properly introduce in this series until now, but he is a notable CT creator with connections to the competitive scene and many CTGP tracks under his belt. You guys might be familiar with Lava Lake, Desert Fort, his Daisy's Palace remake that I touched on in last month's video, and Medieval Castle Grounds, along with many other tracks from older versions of CTGP. This track takes place in a ruined castle in the middle of a lake, deep within the Lost Woods from Breath of the Wild. Joris actually wrote out a small story with background information to this track on the wiki page that I recommend you guys check out if you are interested. It's really neat even as someone who hasn't really gone through any of Breath of the Wild. I promise I'll get to it eventually. But anyways, this track has been floating around for quite some time, and it was actually Joris's intention to make this pretty simple to complete it in a short amount of time, only for this to go, in his own words, from taking 2 weeks to a year of on and off work, mostly to add various details. The life of a CT creator. But you can tell a lot of work was put into this. I will preface this by saying that I have played this online already in the CTGP track testing Discord server, to which I dominated everyone else. But I do mention that because I can pretty confidently say that this one is fun online and leads to really solid player-to-player interactions. That's due to the design. It's explicitly designed like Peach Gardens in the sense that the track starts off with a big grass cut and the amount of item sets later into the track is roughly the same. It works really well here since Peach Gardens is a track that gets picked quite often in competitive environments, so it has that going for it. But the big cut at the start is also not its only cut. After the split path in the castle, there's a mud cut over the water in the tight line that's pretty satisfying to take, and it saves a decent amount of time right before the last item set, which could lead to some cool predicaments. There's also some small cutouts in the middle statues for shock players to take in this section for a risk-free and faster path after shock, which I think is nice. Then it finally ends off on a satisfying, somewhat risky shroomless with a bit of a learning curve at first. It's one of those split-second decision shortcuts that I really like. You have to think about the shock and the risk of failing cut in general right at the end. The design is great. It balances the luck element that Peach Gardens has with these strats towards the end that I feel will reward both smart item play and good driving. This is also just generally very satisfying to drive with its smooth road and the fact that it's fast paced despite not having too many boost panels or ramps. The ramp into the downhill of the last castle section is especially satisfying to drive. I see this track being fun for the time trialers as well as a simpler course. Let's move on to the visuals now because oh man. So on laps 1 and 2, the track is more of a typical grungy course in the middle of nowhere with haunted trees and foggy surroundings. It has a distinct midnight blue color palette. The background scenery is also really nice with the detailed castle modeling, the boo statues, the forest and trees in the backdrop, and the subtle shadows and beams of light in the castle sections themselves. The visual experience is filled with the right thematic models and textures. It truly feels like you are stuck in this random castle in the middle of an ominous forest until it truly becomes haunted. The star of the show on this track comes on lap 3 when the midnight blue sky turns blood red out of nowhere, leading the water to reflect back that red and for the track to seemingly get brighter and less foggy. This creates such a climactic moment in the track and I absolutely love it. I'm not even sure how Joris managed to figure this out technically. Apparently he had Brawlbox Gaming help with this, who's another technical mastermind, but it changes quite a few visual elements when the sky turns blood red. I love how the whole track changes so harshly from the moody blue tint into a haunting bright red one. You guys also might have noticed that the visuals weren't the only thing that changed in the track with the rise of the blood moon. There were actually more obstacles on lap 3 because of it. Specifically the Goombas with their bright red eyes that presumably got brought back from the dead with the rising of the blood moon, which is a mechanic from Breath of the Wild. I believe. I don't actually know, but I'm just basing this off the wiki page for the track where Joris wrote that. It is a really neat concept though, and it was executed perfectly. It's such a cool effect from the custom Goomba texture itself to their actual functionality, and again, I still don't really know how Joris did this exactly. He also purposefully left the shrooms that these Goombas would have spawned on lap 1 so that the person starting in first can have an easier time running for the first lap, which I think is a nice touch, considering that larger shortcut. A lot of people like to drop back on Peach Gardens in competitive events, so hopefully these shrooms would inspire more people to just run with whatever item they have. It balances out that skill and luck difference better because of it. The Goombas are the main object other than the red thwomps, but there are many other objects in the track filling up the background, like some of the birds flying around, a pinwheel, and flying targets near the entrance of the castle that I'm pretty sure are from Breath of the Wild, but I don't really know what exactly they are. Still really cool, and I imagine it would be even cooler for those who are actually familiar with Breath of the Wild and its mechanics. The track easily succeeds at what it sets out to do, which is to make a simpler course with competitive strats and an easier learning curve. The incredible atmosphere, amazing visuals, custom object work, and outstanding modeling from the background to the design itself almost seem like bonuses to the smart competitive lens that this track already has, and it's truly incredible how amazingly put together this is. This was submitted to CTGP and it got accepted, obviously. I personally can't wait to play this one in competitive events. Incredible job here, Joris. I know the release of this track marks the start of a long break from track creation while you get through your masters, so good luck with that, and I hope you do later find the motivation to finish some of your other custom track projects when you have the time to do so. I'm gonna give a content warning before this track, mostly because I think it's funny to give a content warning before showcasing a Mario Kart Wii track, but if you guys are not a fan of satanic imagery or don't want to see dry bone corpses in a CT, you can skip ahead to the next track using the timestamps listed on YouTube. Our next track is another pretty big return for a different, well-established author. This is Red Rooms by Jasper, which was a track initially uploaded in 2020, but was updated on the 30th of the month. Jasper's another very notable creator that I've mentioned in this series before with his April Fool's track Anti-Gravity Zone and his help on the Jungle Ruins update 2 months ago, but I haven't been able to properly cover a more serious work of his until now. This is an update to his track formerly known as Hell's Dimension, set within a satanic dungeon with pentagrams, dry bone corpses, and thwomps surrounding the track. The intention with this update was to make it more dark and gory, with more visceral satanic imagery and other torture devices slash atmospheric elements theming around death. This could very well be the first time I get demonetized on YouTube. Actually, I forgot about the how to dispose of a dead body video. I was given limited ads on that one for whatever reason. Either way, I'm joking with the demonetization thing, but Jesus Christ. And we'll definitely need him as we navigate this track because this one is intense. I'm gonna start with the background elements and imagery for once because, yeah, you can see the hanging dry bones within like 10 seconds. The bloody text on the walls, the straight up satanic ritual with the candles and everything in the middle of the track, the many chains, the dried bone heads on spikes, the pentagrams, the eyes that fade in and out on the spiral, and especially the torture devices at the end. I can't believe that Jasper modeled torture devices that are in the process of torturing dead Koopa Troopas, since that's what Dry Bones as a character are. He did not hold back at all with this track, which made for something very concerning, but also impressive all things considered. I like the idea of setting no boundaries with tracks and just making whatever your heart desires, but the fact that Jasper did recreate this imagery so well concerns me. Moving on to the rest of the visuals, the whole visual experience is very solid. Luckily, these are unique textures too, so this track really does stand out. There's also the visual enhancements like the lighting from the boost ramps and the edges of the track where you can fall off as a way to be like, yo, don't fall down here to the racer. I'm also not sure if this is a post effect thing or something else specific, but I like the glowing effect on the RBC type corners as well. It looks really neat. That brings me to the design, which is surprisingly very nice for how much this focuses on the atmosphere. It's almost foreshadowed by the visuals, but the track drives really nicely. There's only one real Shroom shortcut in the middle of the track, so it's definitely a heavy running course with many boost panels and boost ramps, but that's still a good thing since you wouldn't want every track to play exactly the same. I like the usage of the split paths here, mostly at the starting section where you can go up and left or down and right. The thwomps and fire bars surrounding the track work as great obstacles, and the section going through the ground is a really neat idea, especially on a first playthrough. This is great to drive. It's essentially an evil and satanic Siberian chateau, but as someone that likes how Siberian Chateau plays, I also really like how this track plays. Overall, this is a really nice update, and it's cool to see something like this that's so high quality considering this could not be accepted into CTGP due to its theme and imagery. It adds so much to the playing experience. I love this update, and I hope to see more stuff from Jasper in the future since he always makes great tracks, but I do like how his only two new tracks this year have been the April Fool's floating one and the incredibly visceral satanic track. It's a nice balance. Amazing work here, again Jasper. Our last track for the main segment is Amanita Abyss by Brawlbox Gaming and Squire Turnbull, which was uploaded on August 30th. This is a very exciting collaboration. I've already mentioned these two quite a few times in this series, but this was a track that was in the making for quite a while. Brawlbox initially made the design and gameplay to the track a while ago in the CTGP track testing server with a focus on mushroom tech and shortcuts. Then he brought on Squire to work on the visual model of the track and to also help design a few of the objects in the course as well. These two definitely work great together, let me say. I've also played this one online in the same test as the Lost Ruins one I mentioned earlier, so I already know that this one works well online too. That was such a fun test. But yeah, let's start with the design. This is a very wavy mushroom type track that drives pretty great. It's pretty smooth despite how dynamic and wavy the modeling really is, but if you come to look at the minimap, you realize there is much more to the track than meets the eye. There's essentially two big shortcuts that lead into completely different pathways. The first shortcut is right outside the cannon where you use the mushroom to do a wall ride strat on the side of the mountain in a similar way to Mushroom Gorge's glitch. It's much easier to do though here, and I find it really cool that there was this idea to make that sort of glitch and mechanic intentional in a new custom track. It's similar to Mushroom Valley in the sense with the starting cut, though I don't really remember if that was designed intentionally or not. Anyways, yeah, it's cool that the wall ride strat is a bigger cut in a track like this that leads to its own completely different pathway, considering it's a niche-ish glitch. I don't think it'd be anybody's first expectation when they'd be trying the cut. The other larger shortcut that's much more obvious is right in the middle of the track, and it's another decently hard cut that I failed in the video and didn't feel like attempting again, but it's either a safe, still somewhat challenging 2-shroom cut, or a pretty hard 1-shroom cut to get from the first mushroom to the much higher second one, then onto the boardwalk. That then leads to another completely different path up until the last straight. It almost seems worrisome having this many completely separate splits to a track like this for online races, but I can say from experience that it worked much better than I had expected. There's an interesting learning curve to this track because I know for myself when I had gone in blind, I had no clue how to do that first shortcut despite knowing where it is, but I like the idea of it not being so obvious since it's not the main shortcut you'd be taking to races anyway. Moving on to the visuals, yes, this is very good. I've complimented Squire's visual work many times, and this is just another one of his great works. Similar to Greenwood Park, which I mentioned earlier in the video, this is another track that you might expect to be pretty similar visually to Mushroom Gorge since it has mushrooms and different sections inside the cave and out in the open, but this clearly looks very different. These textures are really nice and unique, and there's a notable and more distinct sunset type visual for the skybox and in the shading here as well. The detail in the background modeling is quite magnificent, with one of the highlights for me being the Bouldergeist model from Super Mario Galaxy, I believe, on the side of the cave as a detailed face made up of the cave's rocks. There's also some great lighting and shadows, with the crystals and boost panels emitting their own light as well. It has some very nice vertex coloring too as well in the cave with the pink, blue, and purple tints from the crystals themselves. I've yet to mention probably my favorite visual element though, and that would be the panning lights in the last cave section. The blue, pink, and purple lights are absolutely gorgeous, and I love their scrolling animation a lot. It's a really nice touch to make that final section feel so climactic visually. I should also go through the couple of custom objects here. There are the stacked swaying Goombas from Odyssey 2 that are amazing. I love that kind of unique obstacle instead of just using the normal Goombas. It's so extra but definitely worth it. And then there's the Uproot Odyssey enemy that goes up and down as a background visual element, but it looks really nice and I like how often Squire makes custom Odyssey themed objects for his tracks. There's also the arrow billboards by Brawlbox which are great, and the custom mushroom object by Squire which is cool as well. With how often Mushroom Gorge mushrooms have been used in CTs, it is nice to see a change of pace there. Everything here is so well put together. These two creators are very talented, and I don't think I really need to try too hard to convince you guys of this track's quality. This was submitted to CTGP and it got accepted already, which is definitely deserved. I think there's a couple minor issues that the council listed that will need to be tweaked before it's added, but I can't wait for this to be in the pack. Incredible job here, Brawlbox and Squire, and I look forward to more of your guys' projects this year. Alright, now that the main segment is out of the way, let's dive right into the rapid fire showcase. For anybody that's new here, this is the part of the video where I give some quick recommendations to tracks and other creations that I didn't have too much to say on, but were still creations I really liked and wanted to showcase. Let's get started. SNES Mario Circuit 3 with Supercars by King Boo Gaming. Well, obviously I had to start with this one. I've noticed that King Boo Gaming, who is someone I haven't covered on my channel at all before, has started uploading a lot of tracks with these supercar models in them for whatever reason, but this is truly amazing and I hope he makes more track edits like this with these random detailed cars in them. Switch's Sky High Sunday by Whacker and Tasreese. This track is a version of the DLC course made from scratch and released a day before the DLC came out using only the footage of the track from the trailer. All things considered, this is actually quite close to being that same version. I do hope we can see future versions of this track that have more time put into them with the actual reference of the Sky High Sunday track as a whole, but for now, this is a very serviceable version of Sky High Sunday. Cheap Cheap Resort by G-Force. There were a lot of CT Jam courses that I wanted to talk about and give shoutouts to since both jams this month were some of the strongest the series has seen. Generally, I tend to favor non-competition courses in this series over CT Jam courses, specifically because they're generally talked about less with how much feedback you can get in that server, but I can't deny the quality of some of these tracks, like this for example. This is supposed to be a spiritual successor to DS Cheap Cheap Beach from the DS Sequels Jam, and it's very nice. It has an overall smooth design that's fun to drive, and I definitely recommend it. This is the first track that G-Force uploaded in which he didn't label it a lower effort course, but I hope to see more higher effort stuff from him as he knows what he's doing for sure with this as proof. Yoshi's Waterfall Sanctuary by Carry On. This is another track from the same DS Sequels Jam, with this one being a combination of DS Yoshi Falls and N64 Yoshi Valley, which is a very nice idea. I really like how detailed the design is with all the split paths here. I don't think the pathways are too balanced, but it's still fun and looks pretty nice too. Definitely worth checking out the jam if you haven't already. SpongeBob SquarePants by Joker03 Gamer. Old York Minute by Kozakira. This is a pretty sizable update to Koza's track from the ancient themed CT Jam, with Alter Yoshi helping with the update, and it's pretty cool. It's a very simple course, but it's smooth, fast paced, and fun to drive. I also like the town visuals and the shadows as well. There's also an ultra shortcut here where you can just cut through the grass in the middle, and I got like a 14-second time, so there's that. I was going to post it on my second channel, but it's genuinely just driving in a circle, so I thought it wasn't interesting enough. Anyways, Koza did a lot of updates to his older tracks this month, which was nice to see. This and Starlit Sanctuary were probably my favorites out of the bunch. 3DS Daisy Hills by ZBL. We've officially entered the ZBL gauntlet. ZBL released 3 commissions on the same day, and then another commission 3 days later, and then a track of his own 2 days before, though that was GBA Snow Land, and we already covered that. This was a commission by Armeg to make 3DS Daisy Hills. It has both a day and night variant, and it also has fast cadence now, which is cool. It was also slightly flattened, but otherwise it's pretty similar to the versions by most other creators. Pirate Storm by ZBL. This was a commission by Act Ishikawa to make a track based on a Sonic and the Secret Rings level of the same name, with the darker ship theme and the bombs from Shy Guy Beach. It has a pretty short design, but there are still many obstacles like the bombs and the Goombas that make races much more interesting. The ship itself is also a nice design element with the pirate Shy Guys hanging off of it, and I like the moody visuals a lot as well. Overall, a really solid, short, but fun and unique course, since not many tracks usually bother with the Shy Guy Beach slot for its ship and bomb object. Mushroom Lagoon by ZBL. This was a commission by Owen Dino Studios, and it's just a simple mushroom themed course. Mushrooms are a little jank, otherwise this is fun to drive and looks amazing as well. Still definitely worthy of a shout out in my opinion. Tour Vancouver Velocity by ZBL. And to round out the ZBL tracks, we have the final commission, which was by Kozakira to make a version of Vancouver Velocity from Tour on the Wii. I haven't played the Tour version of this, but I have definitely seen this design floating around, and it seems to stay true to the original. I definitely really like driving this, and I also really like the idea of the narrow and dynamic boardwalk going through the massive wintry forest. It's a pretty nice design for the Wii. Triple Temple Trouble by Carry On and Kanto Epic. Moving back to more CT Jam tracks, I wanted to cover a couple more from the Mushroom CT Jam, and I certainly had to cover this one. This is a track based on the Hammer Bros, with each section being dedicated to another variant of the Hammer Bro, and the mushrooms being the connecting factor between these sections. I remember this is a big moment when the results were revealed, considering this is the first track ever to have Kanto Epic as a track author, despite him essentially being the main mod of the wiki with many track updates. Unfortunately, he didn't model anything here, but he did give out suggestions and custom textures to Carry On to make the track, and he also worked on the KMP. I think both guys did a great job here. I really like the design, I like the idea, I like the visuals, I really like the moving skybox, and everything was put together really well. Mushroom Hideaway by Yoshi. This is another track from the CT Jam, and it was a solo submission by Yoshi, who I remember caused an uproar in the chat as well when his name was revealed, since he hadn't made a track in quite a bit. It felt like we were overdue for a Yoshi track, and yeah, this is a really solid and simple mushroom track with a sort of fantasy inspired atmosphere and a lot of split paths. I really like it. 3DS Rainbow Road by Diego Vapey. This was an interesting one. There's many versions of 3DS Rainbow Road on the wiki, but I saw that Diego Vapey, a creator who's made quite a few tracks this year that I haven't been able to cover yet, made his own version. 3DS Rainbow Road is a pretty notoriously hard track to get right on Wii because of how different the game plays compared to Mario Kart 7, with it being a pretty detailed one-lap track with hard custom objects to port. But Diego did a great job here. I really like the visuals and some of the design ideas to make this better for Wii racing. He said he'd probably downscale the track in a later update, which I think would be a good idea, but otherwise I think this is a pretty solid version of 3DS Rainbow Road. And finally, Remix Bowser's Castle 1 by Brud de La Boy. Funny we're ending off another month's showcase on a Brud de La Boy track. This is a version of Bowser's Castle 1 based on the Tour's remixed version. Other than the pretty different design from the original BC one, the most notable part of this remix stage is the usage of conveyors that either push the racer back or pull them forward. While this is a pretty simple track, I do like this mechanic a lot, and I think it adds quite a bit to races, especially that middle section where you have to swerve horizontally to get to that forward facing conveyor each time, and the last turn as well. Another solid take of a tour track by Bra here, and I hope she continues to do this because they are very nice, even as someone who hasn't played Mario Kart Tour. Alright, with the rapid fire showcase out of the way, let's move on to the final section of the video, the awards. The award for the best CT Jam track of August 2022 is gonna go to Toad's Temple by Lucio Wins and Tarza. There were so many great CT Jam tracks this month, but this one in particular really went above and beyond just being a competition track with its incredible design, visuals, custom objects, and effects that seemed like it had more than a week's effort put into them. The award for the best CT program of the year so far is going to go to PackDev by Billy Noodles. I don't think there's been much software uploaded to the wiki this year, but PackDev might be one of my favorites regardless. It's easy to use, fully functional, and is super promising for potential future versions, so I definitely had to give it a shout out here. The award for the best visuals of the month is gonna go to Amanita Abyss by Brawlbox Gaming and Squire Turnbull. There were a lot of great visuals this month, from Greenwood Park to Lost Ruins to Red Rooms to Shroom Skybridge, you name it. But I always find myself coming back to Squire's visual style because of how almost warm and detailed it is, especially on a track with more grand modeling like this. I also didn't feel comfortable giving Red Rooms the best visuals of the month because, yeah, but great job here anyways, Brawlbox and Squire. And finally, the award for the best custom track of August 2022 is gonna go to Lost Ruins by Joris MKW. This might have been the hardest month for picking the award considering how incredible most of these tracks here are, but despite how basic this pick might be, I feel pretty confident giving it to Joris here. The design is incredibly strong, it's fun to drive, it's incredibly detailed, and the visual element of the sky turning blood red on lap 3 makes for one memorable as all hell experience. And I'm not talking Red Rooms. This is probably one of the most well thought out CTs ever. Amazing work here, Joris. And with that, summer 2022 has come to a close. Thank you guys so much for watching this all the way through. It really does mean a lot. As always, the wiki links and YouTube pages for all the authors I covered are in the description if you guys would like to support them. Just as a fair warning, with my school semester starting and me being a lot busier now, this is probably going to be the last wiki showcase video that I get out in a reasonable amount of time. And yeah, even August video took me a few extra weeks, so it might take me a while to make the next episodes in this series. I will aim to get each episode out before the next month starts, and will hopefully have 2022 wrapped up by the end of January 2023. But I appreciate you guys sticking around and still supporting this series because I'm really glad to be able to make videos more often. If you're still here, just like the damn video if you watch it this far, and I propose to you the option of subscribing if you would like to conduct future business ventures of me releasing more videos and you watching them. Thank you again for watching, everyone, and I'll see you in the next video. Peace out.